Luke Treharne on the Odd Pod. Luke, we go a long way back. I'm meeting a lot of people for the first time doing this, which is really cool. But it's also been a good excuse to link up with you again now that you're living over in Hong Kong. I don't see you all that often anymore. So this is a good excuse for us to catch up and have a chat.
100%. Yeah, we go a long way back. I think probably the student sevens, GB students. I think we're talking 2011, 2012,
Oh,
maybe around that time.
yeah, probably
Yeah.
probably won't make us feel good remembering how long ago that was. But today, actually, still a highlight of my career. Like I loved those student tournaments. That student sevens we did in France,
Yeah.
one of the best tournaments I've ever played. I loved it.
Yeah, I still love it. And that kind of got me off on a road of creating videos based around rugby, I think now looking back at it. And one of our good mates, Dan Bibby, who's also England GB Sevens great. He actually messaged me 2 weeks ago saying he's watching it with his kids. And I was like, I can't wait to kind of get to that stage in 5, 10 years time, whenever it is. And you can kind of have those same experiences, and something that happened 10 years ago will still bring a smile to your face. Yeah,
That's
no,
so true.
real fond memories of back there. I think we both definitely caught the sevens bug, which's taken us off in our careers. But yeah, no, loved that trip in particular.
I haven't sat down with my son and made him watch that yet, but 100% I will do. So for people who don't already follow Luke, you need to get on and follow his personal page, but also follow This Is Sevens. We'll talk a bit more about that. But the beginning of your, as you say, your content creation around rugby might have been that. And he made an awesome YouTube video. And I remember I've honestly watched it hundreds of times. I just
Yeah.
love the nostalgia. It was a nice time. What I've realized is I'm going to call you Doc throughout this conversation, which obviously lots of people who are listening are doctors and probably get referred to as Doc in quite a
Yeah.
flippant way. But everyone calls you Doc.
It's probably one of the least original nicknames probably around kind of in those rugby circles. It's either like your surname, what you do, or something that you'd rather forget that people call you as your nickname. Yeah, I studied all the way through med school, finished med school down in what was called Peninsula, doesn't exist anymore, but it's now Exeter and Plymouth Med School. And I think, yeah, that's kind of where the imagination of rugby players as far as it kind of extend. Yeah, I've kind of been Doc since the age of 18, which has been, yeah, a nickname I've really enjoyed. I actually don't get called it all that often in Hong Kong, just hasn't quite picked up. But anytime I kind of dip back into seven circles or different rugby circles, like they call you that. So it almost feels like a bit of an alter ego now that I'm not running around in the seven series, to be honest. But anytime I get called it, yeah, it brings back nice memories. Already chatting about one back in France for that Students World Cup. Yeah, 10-year career. There's loads of class memories.
So as you said, like 10-year career in at the top level of rugby, smashing the sevens circuit up. But before that, and before you got into being a professional rugby player, obviously you had your childhood and then you went to university to study medicine. So that was your thing. And I imagine at that point, did you go to university thinking I'm gonna do med school and then go and be a practicing doctor? Was that the aim?
I think so, yeah. It's actually, now that I don't practice medicine, obviously you do get asked it quite a lot around, say, like why you didn't or what were you aiming to do, like how your mindset has changed over the years. And I think for me, a stranger from outside, my end goal was almost finishing university without really realizing it. I like the one thing with medicine, they get you to pick now in hindsight, being a bit older, they actually get you to pick that you want to do something like medicine or dentistry really, really young. So even from your GCSE choices, you need to decide that you have to do like the biology, the maths, the sciences to get certain GCSE results, which then lead into the certain A-level results. And before you know it, you've actually started yourself on that path at the age of like 14, 15, which is actually a crazy young age to,
No one knows what they want to do. Like no one knows who they are at
yeah,
that age, do they?
it's mad. So I think because I was someone who enjoyed school, I enjoyed learning, enjoyed all sorts of subjects, you get kind of pushed a little bit more towards those paths. It's probably worth mentioning that both my parents are actually doctors. So I did grow up in a household where I did see my parents going off to the GP surgeries, the hospitals. So I did have that in my life, which probably helped steer me towards it. But if anything, my parents were like, don't choose medicine, go and just try everything, see what you like, see whether you still want to do medicine at the end of it. But at the age of like 16, 17, going into 18, I was adamant I wanted to go do medicine. And yeah, ended up applying, ended up getting in. And then I think within the first couple of years, I absolutely loved medicine. I loved being around kind of like-minded people, people who were equally enjoyed the academic side as well as, say, playing sports, which I don't think I'd always had at a younger age in, say, primary and secondary school. It was definitely almost like one or the other. But as I went through med school, I got the opportunity to play more and more rugby. And for me, chatting to slightly older doctors or seeing fellow students who maybe when I was in first year and they were in fifth year, so by the time I worked through med school, they were quite well into their medical careers. They were almost like, oh, if you've got the chance to go do something as cool as play rugby, like you can always come back to medicine. There'll be a way back. Why not go and explore those avenues? So that's what I did. And to be honest, I don't really feel any regrets about it. Like there's certain people who are like, what was the point of studying for 6 years? And not doing it. And I was like, well, I learned a lot in that 6 years, incredible experiences, lots of transferable skills. And at the end of it, I had a different path I could have gone down. And yeah, that's kind of where it's taken me. And it's taken me all around the world. Amazing experiences, met amazing friends. We'll count you within that as well, Mitch. And now I've got this opportunity to live halfway around the world doing something that I love.
I love that. I think it's such a good reminder, like particularly for young people who might be listening to this, who either go through medical school now or maybe just come out the other side. It's really easy to feel trapped in our choices, isn't it? I mean, you
Yeah.
go, as you say, especially if you've been kind of on the road since you're 14, 15, and you think, and the more you commit to it, the more chips you put on the table, the more you feel like you need to stay in the game. And I can imagine that that is the case with medicine. So in that respect, like, I was quite a brave, even though I could, I more than anyone can understand the draw of rugby and going for a rugby career because I know the benefits. And I know what an amazing experience it was for me. But it must be quite a brave call as well. Like, was there must have been some hesitation, some doubts, or was there not? Were you fully swept up in the rugby thing?
I think from a real young age, like my dream had probably been to play. If you were to ask me from a real young age, my dream would have always been to play rugby for Wales at some point in some shape or form. So I think from me, having that as an opportunity, even if it was only going to last for a year or 2 years, for me, that was worth if you want to call it a risk, you can call it a risk of leaving the medicine behind to come back to it. But I felt I had enough support around me that if, say, the rugby did go pear-shaped, I got a career-ending injury or something similar, that I had the avenue and the ability to come back to medicine. So even though it looks like, especially now, 7 or 8 years since I maybe graduated, that you had nothing to do with it, I knew I had lifelines to come back to medicine if push came to shove. So it probably looks like quite a big decision, but it wasn't made quickly. It was made with a lot of thought, and there was also the backup options made with the dean of the med school, as well as other teachers and tutors, that if it did go south with the rugby, I could come back.
So there's a bit of strategy involved. I want to come back to like how you juggled a bit of both at times in your career. But while you were speaking then, it reminded me of something I saw on Instagram this morning, actually. And Instagram, we know, is sometimes a gold mine, sometimes not. But this was it was someone pointing out that there's different questions we can ask ourselves in life, which are useful and some which aren't. And often we talk about like, what's my purpose in life? But that has this kind of far reaching, long look into the future tied up to it, which sometimes is really difficult. And a better question might be, what brings me alive at this point in my life, and being guided by that. So when you were 17, 18, that was medicine. That was the right thing for you. By the time you were a few years through med school, rugby was bringing you alive, and that became the right thing. I just think that's a nice one to remind ourselves about in terms of like how we're making life decisions, how we choose this path or this path. Bear in mind, there's going to be a few different pulls on our interests and our time. And on that, when you have multiple, sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, just in terms of that kind of like your purpose, I think that was probably one of the biggest eye openers for me. So I think a lot of people get into medicine to obviously help people. Like that is kind of the underlining reason often why people get into it. And I think I was getting a little bit despondent as I went kind of through to like third, fourth, and fifth year of particularly where I was working in the hospitals, of seeing so many people who weren't that keen on helping themselves through whether it was like the ability just to lose anything from like 5 kg to 10 kg, which would have massive health benefits, to just reducing their smoking from say like 60 to 100 cigarettes a week just down to 30, just to try and help themselves. And there's a lot of hard work that goes into medicine, not just in med school, but once you do become a junior doctor, it just ramps up another level. And when you're putting in that much effort to try and help a majority of people who aren't, say, that keen to help themselves. And I think that shifted a lot in terms of the UK population compared to, say, when my parents maybe were junior doctors. I found that quite, that made me quite despondent, or a little bit like kicked every day you went into the hospital. And if I kind of flip that on the head to where I'm at now, in terms of the different avenues of work I do, I'm actually helping kids from the age of like under 10s up to about under 25s. And they are so keen to better themselves through rugby. Rugby is a vehicle that can take you on to rugby, but it's also a vehicle that'll take you on to different work, different trips, meeting different friends, learning different skills, communication, leadership, etc. For me, I feel far more fulfilled every time like a teenager sends me a message and be like, I found that video really useful. I used it in a game, and the chip and chase or the tackle or whatever it was, I actually made my first try because I was able to complete that skill. And I found that really fulfilling from a purpose point of view with where life has taken me kind of post medicine.
That's fascinating insight. And it's an interesting reminder, isn't it, that there are many ways to benefit people. It's quite sad, but totally understandable about the sort of demoralizing impact of, I guess, society. Because like it's difficult. I always think that doctors are some of the best at having that non-judgmental approach of patients, because you're dealing with so many people, and it's going to be a very tiring process if you're criticizing people non-stop. But the reality is, yeah, if you're seeing people time and time again that aren't looking after themselves, that must be incredibly difficult when you're already swamped, and we know the NHS over in the UK is. And I just wonder how people manage that, and how easy or how difficult probably it is for medical professionals to stay kind of judgment free, and not just of individuals but of like society as a whole. There must be incredible frustrations that go with it around health policy, I guess, as well, like the structures in place, some of the negative influences that young people are growing up with in terms of their health, or and lack of support around that, lack of education. And I guess this adds to the stress of people who are full-time in the profession now. And that's, yeah, that's part of the reason why UK Doc exists, is to support people with that, the stress and the kind of fatigue of all these different elements. Do you think that there is something in that? You know, you've seen the junior doctors and you'll know people who are working full time. Would it be fair to say that you see that and that puts you off getting into the profession full time? Even if you did,
Um,
like, say you didn't have the stuff going on that was
yeah,
going well for you now.
oh, 100%. Yeah. Speaking to my friends who are into kind of their specialty training now, and it's one of the biggest things they say that is kind of a nag on them, particularly when they're working, say, like a full shift, and then you're having to do the extra revision for the extra exams in the evening. And then you end up seeing, say, similar patients who are just, they're kind of there to be there. They want help, but they want almost like a magic pill to take instead. And this kind of, there's no real magic pill in the world. Otherwise, someone would be an absolute billionaire somewhere. And often it needs quite a bit of input from patients as well as the doctor. So it's almost trying to like row a boat where only like one side of the oars are moving and then the other one's moving at like a tenth of the pace. Yeah, like I personally only saw it for those 6 years I was in med school, but my friends who have carried on, like it's one of the biggest things they say, particularly in the UK, which they find difficult.
I suppose so. I mean, how do we? This might be too big a question, but like, what do we do to address that? I mean, and have you seen something different over there in Hong Kong, or like on your travels around the world? Like, have you seen things that would be a positive influence over here in the UK? You've already mentioned like the positive influence that you try to have through your channels and impacting people that way. Do you think that is like the route in, especially for young people?
I think since coming to Hong Kong, one thing a lot of us as expats always comment on is that you don't see as many obese locals as you feel like you would do if you were back home in the UK. Partly, I imagine that's to do with the weather. It gets so hot and humid here. Like if you're carrying an extra 40, 50 kg round, you are going to be next level hot, and it's going to make living here quite difficult. But also I think within the local culture, they're very happy to call people out on if you are a little bit fat. Like they will say straight to your face, they're like, oh, you're fat, aren't you? And they don't mean it like a nasty or a judgmental way. They are just like you are fat. I'm just going to tell you you're fat. It's just an observation that I made. And it can be quite, they don't just do it with that, they do it with quite a lot of things as well. And it can be a bit of a slap in the face as an expat. But once you learn they don't mean any offense by it, they're just stating the facts. Yeah, it's just a different way of approaching. But I also wonder whether that has an impact on people's weights, just because it's seen as if you're fat or if something's going wrong for you, it's kind of a judgment on your whole family, not just you as an individual.
It's interesting. I wonder how that would go down over here in the UK. I mean, I think like obviously approaching the any kind of health problem with like kindness and consideration has to be number one. But are we, I suppose there's been probably more of an educational bit, like are people aware of the impact
Mm.
of their lifestyles? And are we growing up as our kids growing up with that awareness? Just changing tact a little bit. Talked about the stresses of like just being a full-time doctor, especially junior doctors. When you were probably towards the earlier stages of your career, when you went back, because you went back to do medicine and you had a break, then you went
Yeah.
back to finish off and qualify, there must have been periods throughout that where you were juggling being a professional athlete and studying, and whether that was at university or when you went back to complete medical school and you're working in the hospital. Just give us an insight into like what that experience was, kind of having your time pulled this way and that way, making decisions, and just how you manage yourself and manage your energy. I always try and get people to just share, their different kind of strategies, I suppose, or their thought process around managing that.
As the rugby grew bigger, it was probably in my second year of med school, and maybe different to how some high profile rugby players have done medicine, like a Jamie Roberts, for example, where he was given almost his years were spread out for more than a year. So he could manage it. It's one of the things I'm quite happy or quite proud the way I did it was that bar taking a full year out around that Rio Olympics year, I did every single med school exam, like course training in exactly the right amount of time. And it was quite difficult kind of from second year onwards. I was having to train the 4 kind of days a week as you would as a professional, but fix it basically around all the studies. I had the agreement and I was very happy with how the Welsh Rugby Union were happy for me to essentially stay down in the southwest in next to Plymouth and Truro, with the trust that I will get the training done when I can get it done, and then I'll turn up probably 5 days before flying to a tournament, or sometimes turn up at the airport knowing that I'll be able to still perform when we got there. And I knew they'd put a lot of trust in me there, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't letting either the rugby or the medicine impact each other, so each got the time it deserved during a week. But that did lead to kind of like real early mornings, long nights. And I also said to myself that I still wanted to have fun and enjoy uni like someone else would. So sometimes when I look back on it, I a bit like, how on earth did I do that? If I had to kind of just be plonked in and do like a week like I used to do it, I think I would definitely struggle. But it was things like you'd be up at like 6 in the morning to do either your weights or your running, you'd go into the hospital all day, and then in the afternoon, evening, you would do the reverse of whatever you needed to do, whether it was the gym or the running again, and then back to doing some work, and then maybe like a social event in the evening. But I was probably running off, yeah, 6 hours of sleep at most, 7 hours of sleep if I was lucky. But at the time, I was like, I'm doing two things I absolutely love doing with a load of my mates. Everyone always talked about how fun uni was. And I was like, right, you're living this to the max, and you were just making sure you do everything. So I don't think I was doing anything crazy, because I was always in the back of my mind knowing that if you push the training too much, there's a chance of an injury, or if you push the revising or the work a bit too much, there's a chance of burnout as well. I went at it full throttle, but I also knew that you would have to pump the brakes from time to time. But like I said, I was doing two things I absolutely loved. I knew it was going to be difficult. I knew what I signed up for. So yeah, I think that was what kind of gave me the motivation from both sides, the medicine and the rugby. I was just like, you're in a lucky position, just make full use of it.
I like that. I think there's a thing around just trying to squeeze the most out of life and all life's experiences, which it's a mantra I try to live by. Sometimes when I'm thinking that way, it's not always clear what that looks like. And I think
Yeah.
now, I don't know whether this is just getting older, but maximizing life for me now does involve trying to get 8 hours sleep, because I know that I'm
Yeah.
going to struggle to maximize the days if I haven't actually rested properly now. And I'm going to struggle to be my best self for people if I haven't had a decent sleep. And like, it's not, I'm not always prioritizing that, but definitely the shift has gone that way. But I think that the mindset still stands. Is that how am I actually going to squeeze the most juice out of this experience, whatever it is? And I just think that's so cool. It's hard one to conceive of, going full throttle, but also know when to pump the brakes. But that is it. That's the balance, isn't it, of how we get the
Yeah.
most out of ourselves and out of life. I suppose the difficulty is when you don't have the choice of pumping the brakes. So if you're on a difficult schedule and you're on you're on a week of nights or something and you feel broken, you feel knackered, do people feel like they have the autonomy to pump the brakes? One thing that you said there, which we have to or constantly remind ourselves, that gives us the choice is, are you doing something you love doing? Like, that's a really good one. If you have the chance to do something in life you love doing, it's going to give you a lot more energy and the ability to stay in it. But also, just having an idea of the priorities. So at that time in your life, you had, I mean, simplifying it, but you had three areas you really wanted to hit. One was the rugby, one was medicine, and one was your socializing. And you went after those things. I suppose if one thing, again, given the podcast we're talking on now, it's probably worth reminding people that prioritizing your mental health and your physical health has always got to be somewhere near the top of the list, establishing your life according to that. But it's not easy. I mean, here we are talking like, it's this straightforward and boom, boom, boom. I'll be honest, for you, like watching you and your life from the outside, it has seemed kind of easy, but I'm sure it hasn't. But this is the point, right? Like, it always seems when you're outside looking in,
Yeah.
and you see someone who's very successful. I've always thought you're someone who's incredibly good at like choosing to do something and doing it rather than beating around the bush. Obviously, your CV is nuts in terms of what you've achieved in your young life already. Has it felt as easy as it looks like to me as an outside observer?
Definitely not. Like I could throw that back at you as well and say that's how your career and your life and the decisions you make, like that's what that looks like to me. As you probably well know, like it's all the stuff that probably happens away from the public eye, or like where it is just say like your family and maybe your loved ones that see that version of you and see what goes into it. And I think, yeah, it doesn't matter what kind of life you live, everybody will have different challenges, different stresses on them. And yeah, people deal with them in completely different ways. There's probably no one right answer to everything. But no, I've definitely had Daisy. Like each time I've gone through life, even like I'm saying, I put a load of work into med school. I went from A levels where you were probably one of the highest achievers within the college that I was in, to suddenly being around extremely like-minded people, but people who sometimes their only focus was medicine. So naturally, from an academic point of view, I probably fell down in areas compared to a lot of people. And I think people experience that when they do go into med school. You're suddenly being compared equally as driven, intelligent, ambitious people. And there was times where I don't think I was necessarily in trouble of failing the year, because a lot of my practical side of medicine was always good enough to keep me up. But I was definitely down in that lower half of achievers from an academic point of view, with certain stresses and struggles from that. And that was something to get my head around, coming from somebody who'd always enjoyed exams and enjoyed the work and stuff. And then maybe after rugby, probably one of the most difficult things to deal with is kind of making that decision to go full time working on This Is Sevens, my social media company, and building that up. One, because there's lots of different avenues and plates to spin, but also it's like a very new market where there's not really as many like case studies to base the kind of decisions you're making off. There are likenesses you can draw to other companies and other industries. But as everyone knows, social media has boomed since in like the last 5 to 8 years, and people are still just figuring that out. And there's days where I've been like, right, is this even enough just to sustain me, just to be able to live and function normally, let alone talking about profits and building the company bigger and bigger. So yeah, I'd like definitely so many stresses and strains, but again, often people have that face, or that people on the outside will see far more. And often, like we chatted a bit about Instagram earlier, that's often sugar coated and more ways than one.
Yeah, and we've spoken about the pitfalls of that a couple of times on different episodes on this podcast. But like now, I feel like we're in more of a reflective stage of our lives now that we're getting older. Do you ever think back to your rugby career or your experiences with medicine and find learnings that you're putting into effect now with the business?
All the time, like literally from kind of when you are first starting to have thoughts around rugby and career, maybe at like 13, 14, and making decisions right up till now. There's different lessons or different scenarios that have shaped everything from how you interact with people, making decisions, big decisions, just knowing what works for me from a decision making process, times maybe where I've got it wrong. And more recently, I was listening to another podcast and someone was talking about a son and his father had essentially spent all of his time working up to be in a job that he wasn't particularly fussed on, didn't love doing it. His son always looked at it as like he's got a safe career, makes enough money for the family. And he was quite taken aback at the age when the dad was at the age of like 60 or 70, ready to retire. And he was essentially like, honestly, go do something that you love because you can fail doing something that you don't like doing. Whereas you might as well fail doing something you do love. And kind of in the last year, that's been something that's been quite a driving force. And for me, from it was a slow leap, but taking a leap to run This Is Sevens full time and make that into a business that one helps people, but also allows me to work and call it a full-time job.
That's kind of the sweet spot, isn't it? Doing something that benefits others whilst also, satisfying and feeling fulfilled in your own mind. So picking up different pieces through different stages of your life, but each of you've also gone through some roles which are quite heavy on the identity side. And again, this is something that's come up quite a lot with doctors, which I relate to, and it's very similar to sports people, is being closely aligned to our job. So identity being quite wrapped up in essentially what our job is. And largely it's because it is a job of passion. It is something that we deeply believe in and feel like is worthwhile for us. You've kind of got that twice in some ways. Like, people even, we're joking about the nickname, but, Doc, you're known as being, he's a rugby playing doctor, or he's a doctor who plays rugby. Obviously, you're also a lot more than that. How have you experienced anything around the identity bit? Obviously, the sort of transition of identity at various points, going from being international rugby player to now playing out in Hong Kong, slightly different landscape.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100% I have. And it was definitely something that caught me off guard because it's whenever you chat to like particularly the rugby unions side of it, it's always one of the big kind of things they foreshadow to is kind of that day you stop playing professional rugby and you're not a professional rugby player anymore. And I'm sure you would have had the same over with England, but in Wales we had loads of chats from ex-players, current players, just building up to that moment where one, have you kind of job wise what you're going to do after rugby, but also chatting about the mental health side of it, of like you're now not going to be hanging around with 30 of your best mates every single day. You might be in an office or working on a site or somewhere where it's a completely different environment to what you've been used to for 10, 12 years, whatever your career lasted. So in the back of my mind, I was always like, okay, I know this is probably going to come, like this is like something to be aware of, but because I'm aware of it, it shouldn't affect me as much. And I think both from the time of stopping medicine fully to then also stopping rugby, just at certain times, there'll be just like an evening or something someone said, or someone asked me a question. And I just like a couple of times it's actually really floored me where I've gone, oh, I'm not actually a doctor after doing that, or I'm not a professional sevens player anymore. And yeah, it kind of really caught me off guard. But then what helped me with that, and I think it's one of the benefits which This Is Sevens has kind of helped me in so many more ways than just being like a job for me, but it's still allowed me to stay involved in a positive manner within a sport and a community that I generally do love being a part of, and helps me grow it and build it. And there has been a few times where I was like, if I hadn't have started This Is Sevens in that lockdown, and then what transpired to essentially losing your job as a professional sevens player, I actually think I would have been floored by it. And I'm not sure. I like pinch myself and I'm like, I'm lucky I made this decision to start this, because I'm like, I actually don't know how I would have dealt with that mentally if it had just been at that harder stop on the end of your kind of rugby career.
Well done, I suppose, and there's a lesson in that, taking things into your control, I guess, or trying to set yourself up so that you have things in your control. The reality is, as you say, like it won't always be that way. Sometimes you get blindsided, life circumstances come at you in a way you could never foresee. I know it's hypothetical for you now, but what would you have done had that been the scenario? Had you not started this in sevens and you thought you'd had longer in your international career and then it got cut short? Where would you have turned?
Yeah, it
I
is
guess in
actually
terms of
something.
like looking after yourself.
Yeah, I think it is something that I have actually considered quite a bit and in depth. There's kind of the two options, I think, of going after the rugby coaching kind of role. So whether you just went in and tried working your way up through the different age groups to try and get in a form of coaching role. I actually don't know whether that would have fulfilled me as much as I maybe think it would have. But I think actually I probably would have ended up doing. Quite a few of my friends that I was really close with in med school, they've actually transitioned out of medicine themselves after kind of working for 7, 8 years. And a lot of them have gone into like management consulting. And they were always telling me kind of towards the end of my career, they were like, there would be a very good avenue for you here. These companies love hiring doctors as just a general rule because of all the skills you learn as a doctor. But they were like, you'd almost have a bit of another leg up again by a lot of these companies love exports people because there's a whole other set of transferable skills. And yeah, in all honesty, I think that's probably where I would have ended up. Whether I would have enjoyed it or not, I've again no idea.
Yeah, I think you would have probably flown knowing you. But what about I guess those are the kind of like tangible strategy steps. But where do you turn, and I guess this could be real world, but where do you go in terms of if you need support or like if you're feeling rocked by something, where do you turn in those scenarios?
So my partner Meg, who I literally will speak to everything about. I've also got some really close friends who they've been there along the whole journey from even like academy rugby upwards. They've got a very good insight into the rugby side of the world. And then I've got my parents who are great shoulders to kind of lean on, even just to have a chat to. But they also have really good, wider, broader pictures of not giving you the answers, but pointing you on the path for then like I would then make the decision based off potentially where they've got me to think about something. And I've always found that really valuable. And it's kind of helped me steer through life. So essentially my partner, friends, and then family is kind of where I go to, particularly, yeah, just to offload, have a chat to find out what's also going on with them. And yeah, I think that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so important to have a circle, I suppose. And some people will have that in their friends, some people have that in their family. Some people might not have that, I guess. And that's where can we find that if you're fortunate, maybe you've got it in the workplace and the people that you see day to day. But if not, then I suppose you need to seek it out. And hopefully that maybe UK Doc provides that. But it's something that you shouldn't only seek out when you're in trouble would be
Yeah.
my kind of thought on it. Like, and it's easy to do, isn't it? Right, when we're cruising through life and things are all happy days, you don't feel like you necessarily need a support network or whatever you want to call it, or support circle. And then it's only when the shit hits the fan, you're like, I really need some people here around me to just offload to or support me or give me some advice or give me some perspective. But the problem is, it's like if you haven't set that up, or if it hasn't happened organically, then it's difficult to do it when you're down in the slump. So doing that in the good times is really useful, not just because then you've got people to rely on when you're struggling, but also because you've got people to share the good times with. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I know that your parents loved celebrating all the good times with you as well. So it's not like you only go to them when you need some help
Yeah.
and some advice. Like they've benefited from, going and watching you around the world. I bumped into them a few times, a few different places, I remember, which is always nice. I think that is really important and not something that we necessarily do that consciously. I don't know whether it's a bit of a bloke thing as well, not to exclude any of the women listening. I think it's particularly a problem with lads, as I've seen it anyway, is that the immediate response is to like, I'm going to just do this myself. I'm just going to
Yeah.
crack on and grit my teeth and go through it. And that's a kind of old fashioned masculine way of going about it. But that's not that useful in my experience. Or it might be for a bit, but it's only going to get you so far. And actually having people around you is much better. And that's what we all want for each other, right? Like, as you said, you want to be there for your friends as much as they'll be there for you. Same with
Yeah.
Meg. And that's a mutual support. This is funny. Hasn't happened to me in any other episodes where I've had so many blanks. And I think it's just because, I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe I was less conscious of having to actually steer like an episode because I was like, oh, just have a chat with Doc, which is quite nice, actually. It's really nice.
Yeah,
So you've done a huge amount up to this point. You're still young. How old are you now?
31 now, into the early
Fine.
30s.
Early 30s. Well, mate, you're doing better than me because I think I now count as mid 30s. So, well, in fact, I definitely will by the summer because I'll be 35, which is the definition of mid 30s. But you've already done a huge amount and you're on a really exciting trajectory with your business. It seems like, again, I'm saying all these things from the outside, not painting the easy picture again, like we've just said. But what's the future? Like, what's the dream moving forward?
I think the dream for me is that This Is Sevens can kind of touch as many people around the world through one form or another. So at the moment, I obviously part of the social media videos. Like a big thing for me is just providing at the bare minimum, like a level of free content for kids or young players or even adults sometimes who are interested in rugby, a level of video and information that they can learn from it and still be able to enjoy themselves and better themselves. That's always been a massive part of why I started the company in the first place. We've also branched out into like an actual online academy. We have a podcast. We work with tournaments, with brands, with charities, all in all different manners and forms. Do a lot of coaching in person in terms of I'm coaching the Hong Kong Sevens Academy, and there's lots of opportunities there. Do lots of one-to-one coaching and mentoring, which I really, really enjoy. And then we have like a clothing line as well, which I'm hoping to actually get set up ready for the Hong Kong Sevens this year. And a big part of where I want all of these, they are revenue avenues at the end of the day, but big part I want to not only just go back into the business, but go back into cool other projects. So come part of like the clothing line is a donation always given to certain charities throughout a month or a year. Same with the academy. Can you bring the price right down so it's like as affordable for as many people in the world while still supplying the maximum amount of value, and always having kind of the guiding principle of like the more people you can help and touch. Like I mentioned earlier, rugby is the vehicle, but I think it's a great vehicle to actually open doors for all kinds of personal development, social development, team development, your work aspirations. And if I can help as many people along the way as possible, I'll be pretty happy in kind of like 10, 15 years time.
That's a lovely way to wrap up something that I think is so inspiring about you as a person, is that every decision you've made along your life so far has always encapsulated a big bit of helping others, having that thought of actually, how am I benefiting other people in the world? And I think we could all use a bit more of that in life at the moment. I think the world could do with a bit more of your spirit, Doc. And I love that. Brilliant reminders throughout this conversation that I'm going to reflect on about finding things you love doing, because that actually gives the energy, the discipline, and the motivation to keep going. How we can get the most out of our opportunities in life by finding the balance between going full throttle and also pumping the brakes. That was a really nice lesson. And the other thing I'm going to do off the back of this is just go and rewatch that student
Yeah.
sevens video from however many years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, if anybody wants to find now, if you just type in GB students or just my name, Luke Treharne, it'll come up quite early on. So well worth a watch.
I'm definitely going to put the YouTube link in the note. And also, I've already signposted in the intro, but go and check out all of the This Is Sevens channels. Whether you're a Sevens fan or not, they're worth a watch, because some of the creativity in the videos, I don't know how Luke does it. He's an expert, but they're just very entertaining as well. So go and have a look, and we'll make Sevens fans of everyone who's listening. But hopefully for everyone, there's been something in this that you can take away and that's inspired you. I'm very fortunate to have known Doc for a very long time. So Luke, to have you on and to chat about your life is really cool. And it's just a good excuse for us to reconnect again. So thanks very much for your time.
No, thank you very much for getting me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting, and yeah, always good to connect with you again, Mitch.